We got somebody closing the doors for us. That's good. Trying at least. I was just going through my side pocket in my Bible carrier, and I realized I got like 3 weeks in there I need to take out so I don't inadvertently teach the same class over again, which would be kind of embarrassing for those of you who would notice, and it'd be more embarrassing for me because I probably wouldn't notice. So, all right, let's start off this morning with a prayer. Dear God, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for the word that you have given to us, and we thank you for what the word can mean to us in our lives. Help us to be encouraged by it and uplifted by what we hear and read today. Help us to take the message with us throughout the week. Help us to be encouraged by what we come in contact with through the study of your word. Forgive us of our sins, dear God. Watch over and bless us and bless our families, bless our children. Thank you, dear God, for the mothers. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. There is no more important job in the world than being a good mother. I don't care what you do for a living. If you can be a good mother, you've got the toughest job in the world, and you've got the most important job in the world. So this morning we're going to talk about the shrewd manager, Luke chapter 16. I've got two different references. One is narrative. It's basically just a read through, and this gentleman had basically done a like a podcast of Luke 16, and he had a lot of good points. So I'm going to try to refer back to that. It'll be hard for me to do both, but it's okay. It's always fun to try to figure out which piece of paper I'm talking to. I never know, and if we get it. So last week we had a fill-in last week, just so that you're aware. There are a lot of advertisements, but next week is Spring Connection. It's actually going to be Saturday and Sunday. It's on the front of your bulletin. And Saturday there's quite a few events, and then Sunday there'll be Dale DeVerney will be here as a guest speaker, and he'll be doing the Bible class as well. So next Sunday will be a combined class. All right, Luke chapter 16, verse 1. This is often discussed, and it's somewhat controversial in as much as there's things in this parable that could be, there's a lot of written word on how controversial some of the statements in this parable are, in as much as there's many titles that say unjust or the evil manager or the unjust manager. There's different names for this. The one that I prefer is the shrewd manager. That's what it says in both my Bible and it also in the King James, so it must be right if it's in the King James. So the shrewd manager is a question of what does shrewdness mean, right? And so we'll get into that later on in the class, but let's go through and read this. Jesus told his disciples, "There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. So he called him in and asked him, 'What is this I hear about you? Give an account of your management, because you can no longer be manager, because you cannot be manager any longer.' The manager said to himself, 'What shall I do? My master is taking away my job. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm too ashamed to beg.'" I always thought that was interesting, in as much those are the first two places he went. Because my dad used to tell me if I don't do good in school, I'll be stuck digging a ditch my whole life. And I wondered if he was talking about that. I'm not strong enough to dig, and I'm ashamed to beg. I know what I'll do. When I lose my job here, people will welcome me into their house. So he called in each one of his master's debtors, and he asked the first, 'How much do you owe my master?' 800 gallons of oil," he replied. The manager told him, "Take your bill, sit down quickly, and make it 400. Then he asked the second, "How much do you owe?" 1,000 bushels of wheat, he replied. He told him, "Take your bill and make it 800. The master commended the dishonest manager because he acted shrewdly. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than they are the people of light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much. And whoever is dishonest with very little will be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy with handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will give you property of your own? No servant can serve two masters. Either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." And then the kicker is in verse 14. The Pharisees who loved money heard all of this and were sneering at Jesus. He said to them, "You are the ones who justify yourselves in the eyes of men, but God knows your heart. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight." So the shrewd manager, some people call him the dishonest manager, what's your first impression? I'll tell you which page your answer's on. That'll be the test. What's your first impression just in general?
I find it hard to believe that the manager thought he said he was shrewd. I would have thrown him in jail for giving away what was mine.
So he would, after doing what he did, after giving an account. What else? What about how it starts? I think how it starts is equally important as how it ends. He was accused. There was a rich man whose manager was accused of wasting his possessions. That's all it says. He was accused. This cancel culture we have today, accusations is all it takes, isn't it? He didn't deny it either. And he jumped right on it. What did he say? I ain't gonna dig. I'll die if I have to dig. And I'm too proud to beg. Sounds just like me. I wouldn't last very long with a shovel, I'm telling you.
Now, people who commit fraud are actually very intelligent. They don't only apply that knowledge to.
It is interesting. There's the dumb criminal and the smart criminal, right? The dumb criminal is the lifelong criminal that's never gonna, probably can't be rehabilitated because they're just not willing to learn. But then there's the smart criminal who does some of the most amazing things with money or other things to bypass the law. And you realize, man, if they put their mind to making use of that in real work, they might actually be millionaires. Legally, as they say. The first question that is always asked, or the number of discussion points that I saw more often than not is what this shrewd manager does. Obviously, he says, I can't dig and I'm too proud to beg. The first thing he does is he calls in some of the, let's assume, the highest debtors of his master, and he says, hey, let's see what you currently owe, and let's rewrite that bill. There's a question about whether this is illegal or whether it's immoral or whether it's just part of his job. So how did the tax collectors make their money? Zacchaeus was a wee little man. Overcharging, taking a big portion, charging more than what was, I can only imagine, that Zacchaeus went in and said, hey, that new washer, you bought a brand new Highline washer, you should pay 20% of that should be taxed to the Romans, Oh, you got all new window curtains, we need to tax those new window curtains, right? The first century, the tax collectors collected taxes on what the people had made or what they did for a living. They didn't collect taxes at a checkout. They didn't have a checkout counter, So the tax collectors had to assess what the people had or made or what they were worth. And one guy might think it's worth $10 and the next guy might think it's worth $100. How bad would it be to live in the guy's district that thought everything was $100, when your neighbor's only paying $10? There was no recourse that I'm aware of. Could move, I guess, I don't know. But these tax collectors were Jews. And it gives us a better insight as to how badly they were hated and why, right? So this manager, this is another interesting point. This manager, his job was to manage the master's household. And it says that he called in the first and said, how much do you owe? So one of these debtors owed the master something. It says, I forget already what it was, take your 1,000 bushels, 800 gallons of oil. All right, so here's somebody making oil, most assumingly on the master's property, and out of the oil that he makes, he owes the master a portion of it, right? But the manager says, take your 800 gallons and make it into 400. The assumption that I read that I like the best is that 400 was his take. The manager got paid by what he upcharged the people that owed the master, right? So by simply reducing their upcharge, their interest, I love this word because I had to read it 3 times to remember, to be able to sound it out. He ingratiated himself to the debtors.
So he's assuming that once he gets fired, he's going to be able to call on these guys. They'll remember what he's done for them, and they're going to take care of it.
And he's specific, right? And he's calling, assumingly, some of the highest debtors in his master's books and accounting. Yeah?
Are you saying that like he only owed the master the amount that he collected and he just gave up his own cut?
But potentially, the guy who was making the oil had a promissory note to the master that if you let me harvest, the olives in your trees and sell it, and I get 1,000 barrels, I'll pay you 500, right? It's a typical barter system of, I'll do the work, but I need to, I need to make a living off of doing the work. And as the owner of the olive trees, well, I got to get a take of that too, because they're my trees. Because of the examples that we have in the tax collectors' stories, is the tax collectors made assessments based on what they thought. It appears here that the shrewd manager was able to reduce how much the person making the oil and selling the oil, how much he owed the master. Because what does it say the master said? The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. It doesn't say he commended the dishonest manager because he stole from him. It doesn't say he commended the dishonest manager because he took money out of his pocket that he knew he was going to get. And so what's another way to look at this? And this is very interesting as well. What were the laws of usury or interest for the Jews? I thought this was another great take because it's just absolutely plausible, 100% plausible. Have you ever heard of the story that in the first century the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were so over the top on the rules that you couldn't travel on a Sabbath unless you were over water? So they would put a pail of water under their bucket under their wagon seat so that they could be traveling in their wagon over water. The law says you can only travel over water on the Sabbath, and I got water under my wagon seat, so I'm traveling over water.
Seriously?
I heard that. I don't know if it's true. It's on the internet, so it's got to be true. The point is they would manipulate the letter of the law to the full extent of their personal gain.
Sounds like mankind.
Sounds like mankind from the beginning of dawn, right? There's another story deliberately told about how the Pharisees would take from what was supposed to be their parents, and they would give it to the church or to the synagogue and say, well, I can't give to you I can't give to my parents what I owe them because I'm tithing it to the Lord. And Jesus, gets after him saying, yeah, but you're manipulating the rules here. You're supposed to take care of your parents first. But they were saying, no, I'm not putting off my parents. I'm giving to the synagogue. I'm tithing. I'm fulfilling the law. But you can't. If one interferes with the other, they refuse to, acknowledge that there was a priority to things. So one of the other discussions was this. In Exodus chapter 22, verse 25, it says, if you lend money to one of my people among you who is needy, do not be like the moneylenders, charge them no interest. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. In Deuteronomy 23, chapter 23, verse 19, it says, do not charge your brother interest, whether on money or food or anything else that may earn interest. So this one commentator said it was very common, right, in the first century for rich people to quite simply put managers in charge, and whatever the manager charged wasn't them charging interest. It was the manager charging interest, which is a shrewd manager in this case. And so the rich man would say, hey, I didn't charge anybody interest. I got somebody taking care of my stuff for me. It's him doing it. And when the shrewd manager had cut the bill, right, what's the rich man going to do? He's not going to go complain to the synagogue because he's not supposed to be charging interest to start with. Right? So now the shrewd manager has the rich man over a barrel, kind of, no pun intended, it's not a barrel of oil, but the rich man can't throw the shrewd manager in jail because the rich man's not supposed to charge interest. But the rich man's making money off of the manager charging interest, in which he's reducing the interest charge and ingratiating himself to the people who owe the rich man money. There really is a lot to this story that could get us spinning, right? And that's what makes it kind of interesting. The point of the story is none of that. Right? It really is. It's not, it has nothing to do with whether it's legal or whether it's right or whether it's, in the law of Moses. That's not the point of the story. If it were, Jesus would have made it more clear. So in fact, we have to get back to what Jesus was talking about at the very end. And that was, of course, what did he say to the Pharisees? For the sons of this world are more shrewd or wise in their generation than the sons of light. The word shrewd here in this verse, in the original language, is only used in this tense, right? So the word is used there's a whole number of places the base word is used, but the word in this tense, in this structure, is only used once. And it's characterized by its link to wisdom or cunning practice, or, as was mentioned before, the ability to think outside the box, the artful disposition of a work, right? The first definition reveals that men are not always evil men, but they are definitely can be wise. Now, the base word is used in a couple of other places that I thought were very interesting. In Matthew chapter 10, verse 16, Jesus sends out the 12. And he says, I am sending you out like sheep among wolves. Therefore, be as shrewd as snakes and as innocent as doves. Shrewd, the base word, is used there as well. Not the same tense, but the same base word. Also, in Ephesians 5, chapter 5, verse 15, be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, shrewd. That same base word is interpreted as wise in Ephesians 5:15. Making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understanding what the Lord's will is. And then again in 1 Peter chapter 4, each one should use whatever gift he has received to serve others, faithfully administering God's grace to its various forms. Anyone speaks, he should speak as one speaking the very words of God. Anyone serves as he does, the strength of God provides him in all things, that he may praise Jesus. To him be the glory and the power forever and ever. Amen. Administering the administering was interpreted as being shrewd, faithfully administering. Those two words were combined in English, were used in English to interpret one word in the original text. So the same word can be used in different places. But the point that Jesus is making here, because he says it quite plainly, is he says, the people of this world, right, are more wise in dealing with their own kind than the people of light. So again, going back to Luke 16, verse 9, In my Bible, it says, would he think that the servant, because he did what he was told to do? I'm on 17, that's why it doesn't read right. For the people of this world are more shrewd in dealing with their own kind than they are the people of light. I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourself, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. Using worldly wealth is the same thing in the King James as the mammon of unrighteousness. Far more poetic. Mammon of unrighteousness. So then you got to go and look up what mammon means. Isn't that what they dropped from the sky? God dropped from the sky to feed the Israelites? No. I'm like, well, wait a minute. It's almost spelled the same. It gets me so confused. The mammon here is talking about money or wealth or worldly possessions. And then the ASV says the means of unrighteous riches, you know. And so what is unrighteous about it? Well, it's worldly. It's not godly desired or godly entrusted. It's a worldly expectation of, I'm a rich man and I got to get richer. I got oil. I got olive trees. Those are only good for oil. So I need somebody that's going to be making oil for me. The riches and wealth of this world are spoken about very often in the book of Timothy. Timothy really takes it to the rich folk. He really lets them have it. In 1 Timothy 6:17, it says, command those who are rich in this present world not to be arrogant, nor put their hope in wealth, which is so uncertain, but to put their hope in God, who richly provides us with everything for our enjoyment. Command them to do good, to be rich in good deeds, and to be generous and willing to share. In the same way, they will lay up treasures for themselves as a firm foundation for the coming age, so that they may take hold of the life that is truly life. So in verse 9, where it says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you'll be welcomed into eternal dwellings. I think that and 1 Timothy have an extremely close contextual definition.
I like the New Living Translation for that verse 9 that says, here's the lesson, use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then your possessions are gone, and when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. So it's a little bit clearer there, because I think of, when I think of the shrewd manager or whatever, he's doing it for himself to benefit. It doesn't seem like he's benefiting others. Whereas, I think the story is that you're to use that money or whatever to love on others, and then you're storing your rewards in heaven.
One of the things that it points out, and your translation is good, Phil, because read the last part of it again if you still have it, about eternal dwellings.
Yeah. Okay, here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. Then and when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home.
So the question goes to the they in that one. And that's another comment that is made that I think is of use for us to look at. In the version that I have, it says, so that when it is gone, you will be will be welcomed into eternal dwellings. That one says they will welcome you. Well, who welcomes us into heaven? I don't think there really is a golden gate with St. Peter out front taking names. I don't think that the people that we ingratiate ourselves, I gotta use it at least 3 times so I can remember it, ingratiate ourselves to, I don't think they're gonna be welcoming us into heaven. Only God and Christ, welcome us into heaven, right? And so it is truly the question of how do we make use of the wealth that we've been given is the point. And that translation was far more focused on making a very good point of that, is that if you have wealth now, you can't take it with you.
That's right.
There will be no U-Hauls behind a hearse. You can't go anywhere past death with anything you have. So make the best use of it now that you possibly can. In Timothy, it's specific in stating, if you're rich, you need to be using those riches for the good of the kingdom. This is saying the same thing. If you're rich, you need to make friends with those around you so that when your riches are gone, you will have the comfort of knowing that you will be welcomed into eternal dwelling. The worldly possessions are not for us to take, but for us to use. It is the definition of Christian stewardship. If we have been a good steward, we will make the best use of what we've been given, right? There's another verse that we need to look at. It's a couple. Matthew 25. I didn't make a copy of it, so I actually have to turn to it. Matthew 25, verse 35. Let's read that. 35 through 40. If somebody gets there, they can read it before me. Matthew 25, 35 through 40.
For I was and hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came to me. Then shall the righteous answer him, saying, Lord, when saw thee and hungry, and fed thee, or thirst, and gave thee drink? When saw we were a stranger, and took in thee, or naked, and clothed thee? Or when saw we thee sick or in prison, and came in to thee? And the king answered and said unto them, Verily I say unto you, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one of the least of these my brethren, ye have done it unto me.
How much clearer could that be? We have been given, number one, we have been given more than we deserve.
Yes. Yes.
That's painful, but it's something we have to remember. All that we have comes from God. It's not ours. If you don't believe that, read Job again. Because we are God's stewards of what He has given us to manage. This parable is difficult in as much as there's questionable dealings that the shrewd manager does or did or maybe shouldn't have done. But the true message starts with verse 9 and goes to 16 and 17. Verse 13, it says, "No one can serve two masters. Either he will hate one and love the other, or he will be devout to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money." That doesn't say we can't have a lot of money. It says we can't serve our money. We have to serve God with our money. That's hard to do. And it gets harder the more money you get. You know why? Because you got more decisions to make.
The big guys come in. They could not figure it out, but she did get caught. She was so shrewd, and I liked her a lot of people did, trust me, that she knew, even in the end, if she was to get caught, she knew what was going to happen. And that was a company, any company doesn't want the reputation of having somebody like this cheat their company, correct? So what she did, she saved enough money that when they came in and told her what's going to happen, you bring the money to us the next morning and you will not go to jail. That's exactly what she did. And another one had 2 sets of books. But to me, my theory always is, who wins in the end? Where are you going to win? It's a big curse about money. It's kind of a curse.
It's kind of like, and I always say it, you can't be too rich, too good looking, or it can't be too sweet, right? That's just me. More sugar is always better. I'll never be any more good looking than I am today. I'm not like a George, being rich is not always a good thing. So contentment is another major point of Paul, is to be content with what you have. Paul speaks of contentment more than once. And I've often prayed for contentment because of that exact problem, is that no matter how much we have, we're always wanting more. And it's that one more dollar that will drive you insane when you start looking for and worshiping the master of money. You can never, ever get enough. But when you start making use of the money that you do have in contentment towards God, you can't outgive God, right? So if we go back, let's look again now at verse 10 and 11 and 12, after reading verse 13, and tell me what you think it means to you. Whoever can be trusted with very little can also be trusted with much, and whoever is dishonest with very little will also be dishonest with much. So if you have not been trustworthy in handling worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches? And if you have not been trustworthy with someone else's property, who will trust you with your own property? This is another one that is very difficult when you're young to realize that, well, I don't have enough. No, you don't. You don't have enough, but you never will. You got to learn to live with what you have. As soon as you start learning to be happy with what you have, and you are trustworthy with what you have, even though it may be little, you'll see it start to grow immediately. I'm only on page 4. So let's get to the kind of the best part in a hurry. So verse 14, the Pharisees who loved money heard all of these and were sneering at Jesus. And he said to them, he said to the Pharisees, you are the ones who justify yourself in the eyes of men, but God knows your hearts. What is highly valued among men is detestable in God's sight. How many of the Pharisees do you think had shrewd managers? Oh my goodness, it's like kicking them in the head. It's like walking up with a wet glove and slapping them in the face. This is what you guys do every day. This is what you're doing every day. I mean, you'd think Jesus was almost trying to get him to kill him. He was goading them continuously because they were supposedly the rich, but they were also supposed to be the spiritual leaders. And they were doing this. How do you think that made them feel? I mean, it's pretty obvious. But what do you think it made the other people feel that knew what the Pharisees were doing? So here's Jesus, open discussion. We don't know exactly how many people were there. Taking it right to the Pharisees, saying, here's your rulers. Ask them how many of them have a shrewd manager working for them. When they know good and well, you're not supposed to charge your brother interest. Also, it goes back to, because if we go back, and I wanted to make a point of this as well, looking at the verses from, that's way back, from Exodus and Deuteronomy, it says, in Exodus, it mentions do not be like the money lenders. So there were money lenders, right? There were people that did that for a living. We don't know if they were Jewish or not, but it said for them not to be like that. The unjust servant, the shrewd manager is definitely someone that knew what was going on and knew how to get around the law, but also make himself valuable to his master. I still really like the idea that if the shrewd manager cut these guys' bills, and then the master told him, I see what you did there. I can't really do anything about it, but I see what you did there. Because it probably was not all up to snuff, right? The rich man, let's not forget what the rich man says, right? The master commended the dishonest manager because he had acted shrewdly. People are going to get away with as much as they possibly can. And so you got to go back to verse 10 and 11 and make sure that we are being trustworthy with little. Another verse from Timothy, 1 Timothy 6, verse 9 and 10. People who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap, and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge men into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. It doesn't say the pursuit of money is evil. It says the pursuit of money is the root of evil. We have to do a little bit of pursuit to keep our family fed. We're responsible, right? We're responsible for ourselves. That was the second bell. I'm not going to go on to page 6, 7, and 8. So next week we've got a guest speaker, so I won't be here speaking at least. And come back and hear Dale, and make sure you try to get here on Saturday as well. I still got a minute. I got 10:44 on this one. I think I've been robbed. All right, thank you.